Drag is holy.
Here we are in part 2 of Pride. Now we're going to get into the heart of things, what all of this has led to. Since Genesis chapter 3, Satan has been attacking humanity's identity. In the Garden of Eden, he told Eve that she and Adam would become like God if they ate of the forbidden fruit, that being children of God, made in his image, was not enough, and they both fell for it. Today, there is an epidemic of gender confusion. According to Reuters, from 2017 to 2021, the number of kids diagnosed with gender dysphoria had tripled, and it's only getting worse. What on earth has happened that would cause those numbers to triple in just 4 years? I 100% believe there's a demonic element, but I blame Hollywood and social media for the bulk of it. Although my first interaction with someone who had gender reassignment surgery was in 1990, to me, the trans movement was really pushed to the forefront in 2015, the same year that gay marriage was made legal in all 50 states. And it began with a boy thinking he should have been born a girl. And so obviously his parents put him on a reality TV show throughout the entire transition process. And if you've followed Jazz Jennings' story, you know that for quite a while he had gained an unhealthy amount of weight and is now finding himself more attracted to women. I watched one video where he's crying to his mom and he says, I don't feel like me ever. I cannot get out of my own head. Well, of course he doesn't feel like himself. He has done the most extreme thing he can do. There is absolutely nothing more radical than saying, I am not who I actually am. At that point, there's just a disconnect from reality. And where do you go from there? His mother's response to his tears in that video was, I know what you're going through. The more you're talking about yourself, it gets harder. You are your own worst enemy. Now, does she really know what he's going through? No, she does not have a clue. But she and her husband are responsible for the conflict he's having now. I felt like crying when I watched that interaction. There was so much pain. Now, Jazz actually says on camera that he does not regret the surgeries, but there are many detransition stories out there. Here's just one. Her name is Chloe Cole.
I have 2 giant scars across my chest that remind me every day that I was butchered by the institutions that we all thought we could trust. I went to my surgeon because I was desperate for answers, and he just told me, it's fine. That's completely normal. Just put Vaseline over it, which didn't make sense to me, but I thought that because nothing else was working, I might as well try it. That gave me a skin infection. It hasn't healed at all, and the wound, whatever it is actually spreading across my chest. I wish I could have my breasts back, but a reconstruction may be riddled with even more complications, and no matter what, I will never be able to breastfeed my future children. Those organs are gone forever.
Now I'm going to show a video from 4 to 5 years ago, a boy who was 11 at the time who called himself Desmond is Amazing.
Be yourself always.
Please welcome Desmond Naples, aka Desmond is Amazing.
There was a lot more to that video, but I'll just say that the audience was clapping and cheering hysterically. There were photos of Desmond shown without makeup, and he was in normal clothing, and frankly, he looked ill and malnourished. And eventually in this video, 3 drag queens were brought on who praised his parents and gifted Desmond with a huge basket full of makeup. He's 16 now, and he doesn't do drag anymore, but he began all of this when he was 8 and attending pride parades. Now he uses they, them pronouns. So let's touch on the pronoun issue.
Hi, my name is Erin. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm
I'm sorry, I didn't see that coming.
As a medical professional and a Christian, I have very strong opinions about proper use of pronouns and transgenderism. Genetically, no matter how you feel about yourself mentally, you are either male or female, and you are an individual, as in a singular pronoun. You are not plural, unless you have multiple personalities or are possessed of demons. Remember the man in the Bible who called himself Legion because there were many. At which time, referring to yourself as they or them would be appropriate. And if, as an adult, you choose to have gender reassignment surgery, well, that's your prerogative. However, the frontal lobe of the brain that is responsible for higher cognitive functioning, problem solving, and impulse control is not fully developed until the age of 25. And anything you do that involves thinking or conscious action relies on abilities contained within your frontal lobe that isn't fully developed until your mid-20s. Now, let me ask you a question. If your friend who is 5'7" and 90 pounds tells you that she thinks she's fat and that she needs to go on a diet, what are you going to say to her? What would a psychologist say to her? Would you affirm the delusion that she's fat? Would a psychologist? Would the mental health professional go along with the delusion and refer her to a nutritionist who would then put forth a diet plan for her to lose weight? Of course not. And why not? Because the scientific data, height, weight, and BMI do not support your friend's distorted body image. Transgenderism, along with identifying as anything other than a human being, is exactly the same thing. If you have two X chromosomes, you are a female. And if you have an X and a Y chromosome, you are a male. No amount of mental gymnastics can change that fact. And moving further down this distorted road, we now have people identifying as furries, cats, wolves, and a man in his 50s with 7 children of his own now identifying as a 6-year-old girl. So from where is all of this confusion coming? Where is this coming from?
I'm Cody, pronouns em, ers, or zem, zers, or really any neo pronouns that aren't ze, her, hers. I am a white transmasculine femme non-binary, temporarily mostly able-bodied, neurodivergent, obsessive-compulsive, chronically ill, culturally Jewish, Unitarian Universalist, non-monogamous, demi-low romantic, gray demi-bisexual, survivor of acute and complex trauma, millennial, and cat parent in mental health recovery.
Lord have mercy.
God is not the author of confusion, but of peace. Where are the lies that kids, young adults, and 50-year-old men believe about themselves? Where are those lies coming from? Now, that is the easiest question to answer in this entire video. The lies are coming from the devil. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him, for he is a liar and the father of it. It comes from pursuing your truth and making things all about you. It comes from individuals like Aleister Crowley, an English occultist who was a huge influence on modern-day Satanism. He wrote the Book of the Law in the early 1900s, and its central doctrine is, do what thou wilt. Not what God wills, what you will. It comes from humans being so intensely focused on themselves that they cannot get out of their own heads. All that matters is, as long as I'm happy, it's all good. But when we decide to die to ourselves, giving up what we want, when we decide to serve like Jesus served, then and only then will we find real fulfillment. I'm not saying that it's wrong to want to be happy, not at all. But where we're searching for happiness is the key to truly finding it. So we have super disturbing looking men dressed up as caricatures of a woman or a demon reading books to kids. We have naked sexual deviants parading around in front of children. And now the word pedophile is being phased out in favor of minor attracted persons. Do not tell me that they are not targeting children. And as the evil and confusion spread like a metastatic cancer, we have this, just to make sure kids whose parents refuse to take them to pride parades and drag queen story hour, just make sure they get their dose of it.
Gun, got a gun from a gangster. Run, little girl, bang.
And
This has been my first year in preschool with a class of my own, teaching alongside another queer neurodivergent educator, and we have been rocking our twos class. We've been talking about gender and skin color and consent and empathy and our bodies and autonomy. It's been fabulous. So today at the lunch table, when the topic of gender and genitals came up, one of our students plainly looked up and said, "Well, I'm a girl today, but I know that teacher Co isn't." No, they're NB. And the look on the incoming teacher's face was priceless. She was shocked in a good way, and she just looked around at the two of us and said, "This class was incredible, and I am so impressed."
At first, the movement was pretty much about individual rights, people just wanting to love who they love and be left alone, or so it seemed. Then a darker agenda infiltrated children's story time in libraries and classrooms. But it didn't stop there. Now, churches are affected.
Are you about to engage in blasphemy?
Well, I'm not, but they are.
I graduated from one of the most prestigious seminaries in the United States, Union Theological Seminary. So I just want you to know that I'm not just a drag queen up here doing a thing. I am actually trained and qualified to be up here to do this. I want to give an extra special welcome to those of you who are here today who feel different. I want to give an extravagant welcome to the LGBTQIA+ community, especially those of us that have been burned by the demonic, homophobic, and transphobic flames of the church. Drag church transcends time and space.
Drag is holy.
I invite you to rise in body or spirit, and let us confess our faith today in the words of the Sparkle Creed. I believe in the non-binary God, whose pronouns are plural. I believe in Jesus Christ, their child, who wore a fabulous tunic and had 2 dads. I believe in the rainbow spirit, who shatters our image of one white light and refracts it into a rainbow of gorgeous diversity.
That is blasphemous!
And finally, we have TikTok famous Pastor Brandon Robertson.
All people are already connected to God. Nobody can be separated from God, because to be separated from God is to be separated from life and reality itself. The same Spirit that gives life to all people is the same Spirit revealed in Jesus Christ, and is the same Spirit that was at work through Siddhartha Gautama the Buddha, and is the same Spirit that inspired Prophet Muhammad. Jesus repents of his racism and extends healing to this woman's daughter.
Maybe the future of the church and of our world is truly in the hands of what Martin Luther King Jr. called the creatively maladjusted. Maybe minorities, sexual and gender minorities, have something to teach the church about dying to self, about new life, about That is not a sign of God's judgment, okay?
Did you know that Jesus helped his friend come out? In John chapter 11, verse 43, this is what it says. Jesus called out in a loud voice saying, "Lazarus, come out." You see, Lazarus was locked up in a cold, dark tomb, wrapped in burial cloths, left for dead. That's exactly what so many Christians and so many churches do to LGBT people. They wrap us up and bind us up and tell us that we need to keep our identity, our true self, locked away. But Jesus, upon seeing Lazarus in this state, he says, "Lazarus, come out. Step into the light. Take off the cloth. Be who you are. Come alive." I believe that this is what Jesus is speaking to every LGBT person. Come out of the tomb of shame. Take off the chains that have bound you up. Step into the glory of who God made you to be, fearfully and wonderfully made, just as you are. You are beloved of God.
If Jesus can learn from his mistakes and can embrace those who challenge him on his blind spots, so can we.
It's blasphemy. This is madness.
I don't really have any additional words about Mr. Robertson, except to say that he and others like him are preaching false doctrines that are leading many people away from the truth. And those are some very dangerous shoes to be in. We are literally living in the days spoken of in 2 Timothy. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but according to their own desires, because they have itching ears, they will heap up for themselves teachers, and they will turn their ears away from the truth and be turned aside to fables. As a Christian community, we must have compassion on those who are confused, struggling, and living in opposition to God's will, whether it's a lifestyle or addiction or some other sin that has hold of them. Every single one of us sins every single day, yet every single one of us was fearfully and wonderfully made in his image, and God does not make mistakes. So why do some people struggle with their sexual identity, even from an early age? I don't know. It started with Adam and Eve and the fall, and I tend to believe it's more environmentally related, although I do acknowledge that some kids display certain behaviors early on. But why do some struggle with addiction in various forms? Why do some struggle with their temper? Well, we are all sinners, born with a sinful nature, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And though we may be born with certain sinful tendencies, Jesus tells us that we need to be born again. And when we are genuinely reborn in him, he will change what needs to be changed. The Holy Spirit will convict us when our life is out of sync with God's will. And although we must have compassion for individuals who are struggling, we are at the same time called to use righteous judgment. Jesus instructs us as Christians, do not judge according to appearance, but judge with righteous judgment. This means we are to use good judgment, not to judge others because that's God's job, but to use good judgment. And in exercising that good judgment, Paul tells us in Ephesians 5:11 to have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness. That means don't take your kids to drag queen story hour and pride parades. It means we're responsible for protecting our children's innocence for as long as we can, because Jesus also said in Matthew 18:6, but whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were drowned in the depth of the sea. I mean, those are ominous words. We can teach our children to be compassionate toward others while at the same time warning them and teaching them about the dangers of certain lifestyles and behaviors that are not pleasing to God. I know this has been a heavy video, and some of you may have friends, children, maybe even grandchildren who have been caught up in a lifestyle that is not pleasing to God. When I was working as a school nurse, I met many kids who were struggling with their identity. And believe me, it was heartbreaking to sit and listen as they talked about how confused they were, how their families were not being supportive of them, and how they just want to be happy. But when love is our motive, real love, then we can talk to our kids and young adults, and we can point them to the truth because we love them. We can raise our children up in the way that they should go, just like Proverbs 22:6 tells us, grounding them in love, teaching them to hide God's words in their heart, and help them build a firm foundation so that when they're older, they won't fall. That said, in addition to compassion, there is also righteous anger. There shouldn't be anger against individuals who are struggling, but righteous anger toward the agenda and the powers behind it. I admit that watching some of these videos made me very angry, and I'm certain some of you are angry as well. We have to get involved in our kids' schools to know what they're being taught, to make sure the curriculum is not a subject matter that is inappropriate. We have to be ultra careful about what our kids and grandkids are watching on TV and their phones. The subtle things that will desensitize them to what is evil in the eyes of God. We need to know who their friends are and what they're doing. We need to ask questions. But more importantly, we need to listen when they talk and be prepared to give them an answer, a godly, biblical answer. So I'll close today's video with these two statements. First, Satan uses our struggles and weaknesses, and he is a master of manipulation. He will use anything and everything to separate us from God. For those who are struggling with your identity, or if you know someone who is, I'll say this: let God define you. You were made in his image for his purpose. In one of the videos I watched, I heard a pastor say, by succumbing to the ideology of the transgender movement, people are not only fighting God in his physical creation, they are fighting God in his sovereignty and in his relationship with them. I may not be able to relate to what it feels like to believe I'm in the wrong body, but I know from personal experience that Jesus Christ is the answer to everything. Everything from addiction, low self-esteem, loneliness, crippling anxiety, and confusion. When Jesus walked this earth, his ministry was centered around sinners, people like you and me, who are filled with flaws, sinners who the self-righteous Pharisees looked down on. But Jesus did not hang out with sinners to party or to appear inclusive, tolerant, and accepting. He hung out with them to call them to a changed life, to die to self and live for him. His call is to transformation of life, not affirmation of identity. We have a country full of confused and hurting people who have bought into the lie that they're not enough the way that they are, the lie that God made a mistake when he created them, the lie that they are not who they were really born to be. And lastly, for Christians who feel more anger than they do compassion, these words of Jesus from Luke 23:34, after he was beaten, mocked, spit on, and nailed to a cross, looking down on those who had just crucified him, he said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do." If Jesus can pray those words after what was done to him, I think we can pray those exact same words for those who are confused, struggling, and lost, but don't even know it. So, is pride something to celebrate? Well, there are two kinds of pride, both good and bad. Good pride represents our dignity and self-respect. Bad pride is the deadly sin of superiority that reeks of conceit and arrogance. It was pride that changed angels into devils, and it is humility that makes men as angels. I thank you all for watching and sticking with me through both of these long videos. I'm sorry, I know they were long, but until next time, pray for those who are living in opposition to God's will. Keep your eyes on Jesus and let him define who you are. Have a great week.